viewers, now moving on, we have our next speaker, Sri Venkatraghavan ji, who is joining us all the way from UK. Very warm welcome to you, sir. Thank you for joining. And he'll be speaking on the topic Brahmavidyā and Non-Vedāntic Darśanas, a perspective from Śaṅkarācārya's Brahmasūtra Bhāṣya. Just a brief introduction to the speaker. Venkatraghavan ji is a keen student of Advaita Vedanta, having studied the Prasthanatraya from Swami Paramarthananda and Advaita Siddhi with its commentary Laghu Chandrika from Mahamahopadhyaya Manidravit Shastragal. He is currently translating the Advaita Siddhi into relatively simple English on his website advaitasiddhi.com. On the professional front, he is the founder of ARC, an energy technology business in London that has developed a cleaner form of energy and was sold to NASDAQ, a listed company, in 2023. A former investment banker and a finance professional by training, he studied computer engineering at Nanyang Technological University in Singapore, followed by an MBA from IIM Bangalore. Again, a very warm welcome, Venkatraghavan ji. Please go ahead, start the session.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om Sadashiva Samarambham Śaṅkarācārya Madhyamam Asmadācārya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavat Vyapta Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Shankaram Śaṅkarācāryam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhāṣya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punaha Sadatmadhyana Naratam Vishayebhyah Parangmukham Naumi Shastri Nishnatam Chandrasekhara Bharatim Vivekinam Mahapragyam Dhairyaudārya Kshamanidhim Sadabhinava Purvam Tam Vidyatirtha Gurum Bhaje Bharati Karunapatram Bharati Padabhushanam Bharati Padamarudham Bharati Tirthamashraye Vidya Vinaya Sampannam Vitaragam Vivekinam Vande Vedanta Tattvagyam Vidushekara Bharatim Sharada Sharadam Bhoja Vadana Vadanam Buje Sarvada Sarvadasmakam Sannidhim Sannidhim Kriyat. Namaste to everyone, and I thank INDICA Academy for conducting such programs, for bringing the ancient wisdom that is embedded within since time immemorial within our Darśanas to the modern audience, and to give speakers such as us the opportunity to convey what we have learned, what little that we have learned, and share that with the world, so that we can learn further from this interaction. So I think you're doing fantastic work, and I thank you very much, and I wish you well, and I'm happy to support you in any which way going forward. And especially Nitin Sridhar Mahodaya ji, I have always admired your work and your and the books that you have written that have, I think, have a far-reaching consequence. So especially with Indian jurisprudence, I think your contribution through your work has been really exemplary. So it's a lesson to all of us. Thank you. So the topic that's been given to me is to present a bird's eye view of the 6 systems of philosophy, the Astika Darśanas of ancient Indian philosophy, in the context of Badarayana-acharya's Brahmasūtra and its Bhāṣya by Bhagavan Śaṅkarācārya. Now, as many may know, the Indian systems of philosophy have broadly been divided into 2 categories: the Astika Darśanani and the Nastika Darśanani. Astika and Nastika, the words in a modern context have taken on the meaning of theistic and atheistic philosophies. But in the ancient Indian educational context, the Darshana system, the Astika and the Nastika philosophies, primarily deal with the acceptance or the non-acceptance of the Apaurushaya Veda as a pramana. The Astika Darśanas, broadly speaking, accept the Pramanya of the Vedas. And there are 6 of them. And we will talk about what 6 they are and how they are dealt with in the Brahmasūtra and its commentary by Śaṅkarācārya. But there are also 6 Nastika Darshanas, which are, I mean, there are more than 6 Nastika Darshanas, but primarily there are 6 that are considered, which do not accept the Pramanya or the validity of the Vedas. And the 6 Nastika Darshanas are the Charvaka system, the Jaina system, the 4 forms of Buddhism, 2 of which are Hinayana and 2 which are Mahayana. The Hinayana systems being Sautrantika and the Vaibhashika, and the Mahayana systems being the Vijnanavada and the Madhyamika. So these systems of philosophy do not accept the Pramanya of the Vedas, and these systems of philosophy are refuted in the Brahmasūtra as well. But I think the focus of this topic, however, is going to be on the Astika Darshanani, those systems of philosophy which accept the Pramanya of the Vedas, and in what element does the Sutrakara differ from these systems of philosophy. So these 6 Astika Darshanas are Sankhya, Yoga, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Purva Mimamsa, and the Uttara Mimamsa. So all of these are founded by extraordinary stalwarts like Maharishis. So the Sankhya system is essentially from time immemorial, but the Sutrakara of the Sankhya system is the Kapila Rishi. The founding philosopher and the Sutrakara of the yoga system is Patanjali Rishi. When I say founding philosopher, I do not mean the person who invented yoga, because for someone to write a sutra about yoga, the system would have had to exist for many years. And so for it to be condensed in a sutra form, at the time of Patanjali Rishi itself, this was an established system of philosophy. What the Sutrakara of the yoga system has done is merely to encapsulate it. And this is true for each of the Ṣaḍdarśanani. And then for the Nyaya system, the Sutrakara is Gautama Rishi, Gautama Akshapada Rishi. The Vaisheshika system is the Kanada Rishi. The Sutrakara of the Purva Mimamsa is Bhagavan Jaimini, and the Sutrakara of Vedanta is Badarayana, also Bhagavan Vedavyasa. So if we look at these 6 systems of philosophy, broadly speaking, these 6 are grouped into 3 pairs of 2. So the Sankhya and the Yoga system are invariably grouped into one pair. The Nyaya and the Vaisheshika systems are also grouped into one pair. And the Purva and the Uttara Mimamsa systems are also grouped into one pair. If we look at the Sankhya Darshana, it is primarily a Darshana which divides the universe into 2 categories. Pradhana, which is the inert cause for the universe, and Purusha, which is the consciousness principle. Now, the philosophy of creation in Sankhya is one of evolution, where the Pradhana, which is or also called Prakriti, Mula Prakriti. Prakriti means cause in Sankhya. Vikriti means effect. Prakriti Vikriti means which is both a cause and an effect. So in the Sankhya Darshana, there is one Mula Prakriti, which is Pradhana, and then there are Prakriti Vikritis and Vikritis. That is, those which are both causes and effects, and those which are only effects. So if we look at the evolution or creation in Sankhya, it is one of evolution. It's I wouldn't say it is exactly the same as modern evolutionary theory, because the focus is somewhat different, but the basic principles are same in the sense that Mula Prakriti undergoes parinama or transformation into its evolutes. So Prakriti becomes Mahat, Mahat becomes Ahankara, Ahankara becomes the Manas, the Pancha Jnanindriya, Pancha Karmendriya. It also becomes the Pancha Tanmatras and the Pancha Mahabhutas. So the 5 Jnanindriya, 5 Karmendriya, 5 Tanmatras, subtle elements, and the 5 Pancha Mahabhutas, gross elements. So that's 20. And then you have Prakriti, Mahat, Ahankara, and Manas. So 24. So there are 24 inert tattvas, Achetana tattvas, and 1 Chetana tattva, Purusha. And essentially Sankhya says that the Mula Prakriti undergoes its a transformation into the world in order to serve the Purusha, the consciousness principle. The Purusha in Sankhya is not a karta, he's a bhokta only. He is not a doer, he is an experiencer. The Prakriti modifies itself for the benefit, for the bhoga of the Purusha. And moksha in Sankhya is essentially through the knowledge of distinguishing between the Purusha and the Prakriti. So this viveka between the chetana achetana is the means for moksha in Sankhya philosophy. This philosophy is criticized as the pradhanamalla. There is this in ancient India. If we had to defeat a series of opponents across different darshanas, the technique that is used is very similar to modern day wrestling or boxing or whatever you want to call it. So instead of defeating every single opponent, what the proponent of his philosophy would do is he would choose that opponent who is the strongest. And the strongest opponent to Vedanta during the Sutrakara's time is the Sankhya philosopher, because the Sankhya system of philosophy is the closest to Vedanta in several respects. So, for example, as Śaṅkarācārya says in his Bhāṣya, Vaidikasya Darśanasya Pratyasannatvat Pradhanamalla Nibarhana Nyayena. So, because the Vaidika Darshana, the closest to it is Sankhya, the philosopher, the Sutrakara, Badarayana uses Sankhya as the Pradhanamalla, as the most prominent opponent, and by defeating that opponent, all the other systems of philosophy are refuted, and we will look at what the similarities and what the differences are between Sankhya and Vedanta. So both Sankhya and Vedanta accept that the universe consists of Chetana and Achetana. So the Pradhana, which is essentially the Mula Prakriti, is Achetana, which is acceptable to Vedanta also. That there is a Purusha who is Chetana is also accepted to Vedanta. The theory of evolution, specifically Śaṅkarācārya. So essentially Śaṅkarācārya means how the cause gives rise to the effect. And there are two opposing views here. The Śaṅkarācārya, which is espoused by Sankhya Yoga and Vedanta, and the Asatkarya, which is espoused by the Nyaya Vaisheshika philosophies. So the Śaṅkarācārya essentially means that the effect is pre-existent in the cause as the cause, in the form of the cause. So when a lump of clay is converted or made into a pot, that pot it's not a pot that comes into existence after the clay has been transformed. Rather, the pot was pre-existing in the clay itself. And the role of the potter is not to create a pot, but rather to give the pre-existent pot, which was present in a subtle form in the clay, is to give it a form. So the existence of the karya in the karana is Śaṅkarācārya, and both Sankhya and Vedanta agree with Śaṅkarācārya. So where are the differences? So the differences are primarily in what Sankhya attributes to be the cause of the universe and what Vedanta attributes to be the cause of the universe. So in Sankhya philosophy, the cause of the universe is the pradhana. And it is a cause in a swatantra fashion, meaning it's independently creating the universe for the benefit of the Purusha. That is something which is not acceptable to Vedanta, and the Sutrakara, across several adhikaranas or chapters in the Brahmasūtra, refutes this philosophy. So according to Vedanta, the creation of the universe is by a sarvagya, omniscient, sarvashaktiman, omnipotent Ishvara, who is Nitya, Shuddha, Buddha, Mukta Swabhava. Is Nitya meaning eternal, Shuddha meaning pure, Buddha meaning who is omniscient, He knows everything all the time, and mukta, eternally free. And the basis for the refutation of this aspect, that the Pradhana is an independent creator of the universe, occurs across multiple adhikaranas in the Brahmasūtra. So if you look at the very first instance where the Sankhya philosophy is refuted, it occurs in the Ikshat Adhikaranam, which is essentially the fifth Adhikaranam of the Brahmasūtra. And the sutra there is Ikshater na Ashabdam. So essentially, what the Sutrakara is arguing there is that the Pradhana which has been postulated by the Kapilas, the followers of Sankhya philosophy, cannot be the cause of the universe, because it is Ashabdam. The Pradhana is not mentioned anywhere in the sutras. In fact, on the opposite is mentioned, which is the Shruti, not the Sutra. The Shruti says that the creation of the universe was always preceded by the creator visualizing what that universe is. Ikshatihi. Ikshatihi means seeing. So the person who sees must necessarily be a conscious entity. So for example, if you look at the Chandogya Upanishad, you have Tadikshata Bahusyam Prajayeti Tat Tejo Asrajata. Then Atmava Idamekra Agra Asit Nanyat Kinchana Mishate Sa Ikshata Lokan Nusraja Sa Iman Lokan Asrajata. Then Sa Ishan Chakre Sa Pranam Asrajata, etc. So in each of these instances of the Shruti, you have a situation where the Shruti is talking about the creation of the universe being preceded by the creator visualizing. And the visualization is only possible by an entity which is conscious. And therefore, the Pradhana, which is mentioned by the Sankhya philosopher, cannot be the creation of the creator of the universe, because the Pradhana, being inert, is not capable of visualizing that creation. And then there are several other reasons for the refutation of this philosophy. But primarily, the focus of that refutation centers around the Pradhana as an independent, inert cause cannot be the cause of creation. Now, according to Vedanta also accepts that Maya plays a role in creation. So Ishvara consists of the Chaitanya and Maya. So he's a Saguna Brahma, according to Advaita Vedanta. Saguna meaning he is endowed with the Maya Shakti. Mayam to Prakritim Vidyat, Mayunam to Maheshwaram. As the Shvetashvatara Upanishad says, the Ishvara creates, Maheshwara creates the universe with he's a Mayi, he's the wielder of Maya, and he creates this universe through the power of Maya, which is subservient to him. Now, the creation by Maya is accepted, but not as an independent entity, but as an entity that is controlled by Ishvara. So that is one aspect in which we differ, and that's the first basis of the refutation in the sutras. The second basis of the refutation for Sankhya philosophy in the sutras is that the Prakriti or Pradhana is an independently existent, independently real entity outside of Chaitanya. Now Advaita essentially says everything that exists is Ishvara only, is the same consciousness principle which manifests itself as this universe because of Maya. Therefore, the universe, according to Advaita, is a mithya, and meaning it has no independent existence of its own. The existence that it has is the existence of Ishvara. So, Sadeva Somya Idamagra Asit, Sat alone, dear one, existed before all this. This is the Chandogya Vakya, which is used as a pramana, or the basis or the reason by which we say in Advaita that the Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya. So the Jagat is Mithya on the basis of Shruti statements such as Neha Nanasti Kinchana, Sadeva Saumyedamagra Asit, etc., etc. So this universe, which essentially is a parinama of Maya, is only a mithya, meaning it has no independent existence or existence outside of the Chaitanya Tattva. And therefore, the second aspect in which we differ from Sankhya is in attributing an independent reality to Pradhana in addition to the Purusha. So we accept that the Purusha Tattva, the consciousness principle that they talk about, we accept that. However, what we do not accept is that the Pradhana has an independent reality to that Purusha Tattva. We say that the consciousness principle itself appears as this world because of Maya. Now, so that's the second aspect. The third aspect that we differ is the multiplicities of the Purusha. So each of the jivas in Sankhya is considered to be an independent Purusha, independent consciousness principle. We do not accept that because Advaita says there's only one consciousness principle, which because of Upadhi Bhedas, differences in the adjuncts, appears as different jivas. And it is the same consciousness principle with the Maya Upadhi, which is Ishvara, and the same consciousness principle with the Avidya or the ignorance or the mind, the Mano Upadhi, appears as these different jivas. So the differences between the jivas, the difference between the jiva and Ishvara is on account of the upadhis, and those upadhis themselves are mithya, and therefore they have no existence, and therefore outside of consciousness, independent of consciousness, they have no existence, and therefore there is no real difference in this consciousness principle. Neha nanasti kinchana, there is no multiplicity in this consciousness whatsoever. This is the principle of Advaita, and therefore this multiplicity of Purushas that the Sankhya philosopher talks about is also refuted. And finally, the Sankhya philosopher says that the Purusha is akarta, but is a bhokta. That is something also that is refuted. Now, according to us, consciousness is neither a karta nor a bhokta, but because of avidya, ignorance, he appears to be a karta, he appears to be a bhokta. Because of ignorance, he mistakes himself to be the doer, and because he mistakes himself to be the doer, he mistakes the experiences of the upadhi as his own experiences, and therefore this bhoktritvam of Chaitanya is also mithya. It's not a real, it's avidya kalpita, is a product of ignorance. So the Pradhana Malla, we spent so much time talking about the Sankhya philosophy because primarily he's taken by the Sutrakara and the Bhāṣyakara to be the primary opponent in the Brahmasūtras. Now, yoga is very close to Sankhya philosophy in that both the yoga and the Sankhya philosophy are Dvaita Darśanani. In the sense, they are both Darshanas which essentially consider the Prakriti to be having an independent reality to the Purusha. And on that basis, the Yoga Pratyukta Adhikaranam, which occurs in the second Adhyaya, first Pada, Etena Yoga Pratyuktaha, the same reasons by which the Sankhya Smriti was refuted, the Yoga Smriti is also refuted. Now, because there are two aspects in which we don't agree with yoga. We do not agree with the Pradhana having an independent reality to the Purusha. We also do not agree with the Pradhana being the creator in this of this universe, like yoga also. And as Śaṅkarācārya says, etena Sankhya Smriti Pratyakena Yoga Smritirapi Pratyakyata Drashtavya iti Atideshati. So the Adhikarana, the Yoga Pratyukta Adhikarana is the Atidesha Adhikarana, meaning that the teaching or the reasons that were given in the previous Adhikarana, which was for the refutation of the Sankhya Smriti, the Yoga Smriti also can be refuted. However, now in one aspect, the Yoga Darshana is not rejected, because if you look at the Shruti itself, the Shruti says, Shrotavyo Mantavyo Nididhyasitavyaha. The Atma must be heard, that is, one must listen to the Shruti statements, understand what their import is. That's the meaning of Shravana. Manana meaning we must carefully analyze those Shruti statements to understand and to refute all possible doubts that may emerge about what the Shruti statements talk about. And nididhyasitavyaha means one must meditate upon the meaning of those statements. Now, this nididhyasana that we are talking about in the Shruti, which has been enjoined as one of the means by which jnana can arise, that nididhyasana is nothing but yoga itself. So, the yoga that is accepted by Shruti is not the Dvaita yoga that is spoken of, which has Pradhana and Purusha as two independent entities. Rather, the techniques for meditation, the Samadhi Abhyasa that is being talked about, the Ashtanga Yoga that is being talked about, those techniques, the practice of meditation and the techniques of meditation are not unacceptable to Vedanta. And that is why the Bhāṣyakara essentially says that in those aspects of the Veda which do not, of the Yoga Shastra, which do not contradict the Veda, in those aspects we have to accept the yogic system also. So he says, Yena tu amshena na virudhyete tena ishtameva sankhya yoga smrityoho savakashatvam. Therefore, in those aspects that are not in opposition to what has been taught in Veda, the Yoga Darshana is accepted. And the practice of meditation and the utility of that meditation in Nididhyasana as a means to abide in the reality that has been conveyed in the Upanishads, in that aspect, it is accepted. That is why in work such as the Jivan Mukti Viveka, which is a work that speaks about how one attains Jivan Mukti. So essentially, after Jnana has arisen, there are two kinds of sannyasa that are talked about. There is the Vividisha sannyasa and the Vidvat sannyasa. This is mentioned in the Upanishads itself. So the Vividisha sannyasa is the sannyasa that is taken for the purpose of gaining the Brahmajnana. The Vidvat sannyasa that is taken is once Jnana has been taken, the sannyasa that is taken to abide by in that knowledge, to live your life in consonance with that knowledge. So that Vidvat sannyasa essentially involves the practice of Samadhi Abhyasa, of yoga, for the purpose of abiding in that reality, for the purpose of the post-jnana nididhyasana. Essentially, this is the for one to abide in that reality, for the purpose of preserving that jnana in the mind. And that aspect has been brought about by in works such as the Jivan Mukti Viveka by Swami Vidyaranya. And in those aspects, therefore, Advaita, Vedanta is not in opposition to the Yoga Smriti and accepts those Yoga Smritis. However, because the yogic system, the foundations of the yogic system are Dvaitic in nature, in those aspects we do not accept it. So as Śaṅkarācārya says in the Yoga Pratyuktadhikaranam, Dvaitino hite Saṅkhyaha yogascha na atmaikattva darshinaha. Saṅkhya and yoga are Dvaita Shastra and do not agree that the self is one. So in those aspects we do not accept it. Now, so this was we spoke about the Saṅkhya and the yoga philosophies. Now, the Nyaya Vaisheshika philosophies are actually quite different to Vedanta and are refuted quite openly in the Brahmasūtras itself. So one of the adhikaranas in the Brahmasūtra is the Shishta Aparigraha Adhikarana, which occurs in the second adhyaya, second pada, and the first pada actually. In this Adhikarana, what the Sutrakara says, Etena Shishta Aparigraha api Vyakhyataha. So in the so 1, 2, 3, 4. This is the fourth adhikarana of the first pada of the second adhyaya. So the Avirodhadhyaya. So essentially, what this is saying is etena. Now etena is referring to all the reasons given in the previous three adhikaranas. the Smrityadhikaranam, the Yoga Pratyuktadhikaranam, and then Navilakshanatpadhikaranam. The reasons given in those adhikaranas are to refute the Sankhya and the Yoga philosophies. For the very same reasons, we have to reject those philosophies which are Shishta Apparigrahaha, that is, those which are not accepted by the Shishyas, by the Shishtas. Or Shishtas means Aptas, or those people, knowledgeable, wise people. Now, essentially, what are these Shishta Parigraha? What are these Darśanas? By this, the Nyaya Vaisheshika philosophies are taken to be those which are unaccepted by the Shishtas. Now, in commenting on this particular sutra, what Śaṅkarācārya says is, Etena Prakritena Pradhana Karanavadina Pradhana Karanavada Nirakarana Karanena Shishta Parigraha. Now he comments on that verse. It says Shishtaihi. Who are these Shishtas? Shishtaihi Manu Vyasa Prabhatibihi. So those Shishtas such as Manu, Vyasa, etc. Kenachidapyanshena Apparigrahitaha. Those who have Shishtas such as Manu, Vyasa, etc. have not accepted the following philosophies Kenachidapi Anshena in any aspect. And who are these philosophy? Ye Anvadikaranavadaha. Like those that argue for Anu or atoms as the sources of creation. So the Nyaya and the Vaisheshika philosophies again go hand in hand. And primarily I would describe them very broadly. I mean, people may have slightly different views, but I would describe the Nyaya philosophy and the Vaisheshika philosophies as dealing with an alternative view of epistemology and ontology. So the Nyaya philosophy essentially primarily deals with the epistemological aspects of the Vaisheshika philosophy, and the Vaisheshika philosophy primarily deals with the ontological aspects of the Nyaya philosophy. And both of them essentially primarily say that this universe came about from Paramanus. So the first atomic theory of creation, I would argue, did not come from the Greeks, but rather it came from the Indians through the Vaisheshika philosophy of Kanada Rishi. And Kanada Rishi essentially propounded this system of philosophy on the basis of Paramanus. He says the creation of this universe can be traced back to the Paramanus. And what are Paramanus? Paramanus are the atoms which cannot be divided into anything further. And this, and primarily the Vaisheshika philosophy, derives its theory of creation from an observation of nature. So just like in this world, you have a piece of cloth being woven from multiple threads. So multiple threads come together to form a piece of cloth. And those threads consist of cotton coming together and being spun into a thread. And cotton consists of various parts. So essentially, the theory of creation in Nyaya Vaisheshika is one of parts coming together to form a whole. So previously we had looked at the Sankhya philosophy, which was essentially one of evolution, of transformation, whereas the system of evolution in Nyaya Vaisheshika is one of parts coming together to form a whole. And if you keep going back, so the cloth, the thread, from the thread to the cotton, from the cotton to the seed, and so on and so on and so forth, we ultimately have to come back to one element which cannot be divided any further. And that element is defined in Nyaya philosophy as the Paramanu. The Anu, which cannot be divided into anything further. Anu is something which is highly subtle. And essentially, so creation is essentially the Paramanus coming together to form a Dvyanuka, Dvyanukas coming together to form a Trinuka, etc., etc. And so from that, from the parts, from the Avayavas come the Avayavis, and those Avayavis become the Avayavas or the parts for the next product, and so on and so forth. And that's how creation emerges. And this is completely in opposition to the Vedanta Darshana, which essentially says that the creation came from Ishvara. So Ishvara created this universe, the Sarvagya Sarvashaktiman Ishvara. Both the Nyaya systems of philosophy and Vedanta accepts Veda Pramana but Nyaya primarily and Vaisheshika primarily base their theory of creation on logical reasoning and inference, as opposed to the Shabda Pramana. And now, and essentially, what the basis of refutation of the Nyaya Vaisheshika philosophies in Vedanta is that these philosophies, because they are primarily reasoning based, the reasoning based philosophies, if they do not have some other pramana which is the basis for that reasoning, it always is subject to a doubt that it can be refuted in the future. And we have seen that. If you look at the scientific method of how new developments occur. So essentially, scientists get together, they postulate a theory, a hypothesis, and then they test that hypothesis with the basis of observations based on perception. And if the observation meets the hypothesis is correct, and the observation fails the hypothesis, then the hypothesis is incorrect. And so you propose a theory, right? You form a hypothesis which is inherently falsifiable, meaning that it has to give you an answer of yes or no, right? It can't be an unfalsifiable statement. And then you look to nature to provide you with the facts by which you can either falsify the hypothesis or essentially prove that the hypothesis is cannot be rejected because the theory it propounds is correct, as evidenced by the facts. Now, the refutation in the sutra occurs in several places. In one place is tarka apratishthānādapi anyatha anumeyam iti chet evamapi avimoksha prasangaha. So in the second adhyaya, first pada again, the 11th sutra, essentially what this particular sutra is saying is that tarka apratishthana. Now, one cannot accept reasoning independent of the Shruti or some other pramana, primarily because that reasoning can always be rejected by some other more intelligent scientist who comes in the future. A person. So, for example, if your philosophy is based purely on logical reasoning, and you derive that particular reasons based on a certain set of facts, it is always possible for a new set of facts to emerge in the future that will falsify your current conclusion. And therefore, in order for you to make a clear determination of something, you cannot rely purely on logical reasoning. And this is what Śaṅkarācārya says. So if you say that today there is a philosopher who propounds his theory based on the atomic theory of creation, and tomorrow there's another philosopher who says that, okay, this is wrong for these reasons, then whatever you have believed for so long has been falsified. So for like thousands of years, people believe that the Earth was the center of the solar system, right? And then it took Copernicus to say, no, actually it's not, or Galileo to say it's not. You have the it's a heliocentric theory, which is the right one. For several years, people believed that the Earth was flat because their experience is of flat. So if you look at pure facts, your perception tells you that the world is flat. But then you travel to space, you observe ships at sea, you look at what happens to how the ship disappears into the horizon, and then you come up with a alternative theory. And then you later you fly into space, and then you observe that the Earth is spherical. So, and then the same thing goes even for like valid scientific theories. So for Newton proposes classical mechanics, and then Einstein comes and says actually that the relativity, that there are certain aspects or certain instances where classical physics fails, and then you have relativity and quantum mechanics, etc. So the thing is like, so each development, while it is really helpful, one cannot come up with a conclusive answer. And the reason why you need to have a conclusive answer is because only a conclusive answer can give you moksha, because moksha is not contingent upon some theory being right. Moksha needs to be absolute for it to be something that is worthwhile to pursue. And therefore, the Vedanta Shastra, which has the Vedas, the Apaurushaya Vedas as their basis, is the is in a much better position to talk about the source of the universe, to talk about what constitutes moksha, rather than something which is ultimately dependent on the intellect of one particular individual or a group of individuals. Now, that doesn't mean, though, that the tarka itself has absolutely no role to play in Vedanta, which is why, for example, the Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana, the Manana limb of the Jnana Sadhana involves reasoning. And so what kind of reasoning is acceptable to Vedanta? Śaṅkarācārya says, Shruti anugrahita eva tarkaha anubhava angatvena ashriyate. Now, you cannot take a shushka tarka, that is reasoning in the absence of pramana support. Rather, it needs to be Shruti anugrahita tarka. It needs to be a reasoning which is essentially advancing what is being told by the Shruti. Because the Shruti is, because it's apaurishaya, it is free from defects. And if you interpret that Shruti correctly, then the results that are gained from that understanding are something that you can rely on as absolutely valid at all periods of time. As opposed to tarka, which is subject to that theory, it is so long as it's not falsified, you have to assume it is correct. But there's always a risk that it gets falsified in the future, and one cannot come up with a clear determination of that. So on that basis, the Nyaya Vaisheshika system has been rejected as well. The atomic theory has been rejected as well for all these reasons. As the Sutrakara says, etena shishta parigrahaha. For these reasons, the system of philosophy which is unacceptable but to the shishtas, like the Manu and Bhāṣya, etc., are also have been conveyed. This is not just the Śaṅkarācārya saying it. The Sutrakara himself rejects the Nyaya Vaisheshika systems of philosophy. So then comes the Purvottara Mimamsa. So the Uttara Mimamsa is what we have been talking about.
Apologies, Venkatraghavan. We are running out of time, so request you to conclude.
I'll conclude it very quickly. So the basis of the Purva Mimamsa essentially involves the interpretation of the Purva Bhaga of the Upanishads, of the Veda rather, the Karma Kanda, and it provides various methods of interpretation of the Vedic sentences, which are very useful to Vedanta. So the acceptability of Purva Mimamsa is in all the techniques of interpretation of the Upanishads, the Shadvida Tatparya Lingas, etc. Upakramo-upasamharaha, Abhyaso Purvataplam, Arthavadopapattischa, Lingam Tatparya Nishchage, and the Tatsiddhi Petika, and all those like Prakarana, Linga, Samakhya, etc. All of those techniques of Vedic interpretation are used in the in Vedanta itself. Also, where it differs is in the Purva Mimamsa focuses on the Karma Kanda and essentially relegates the Upanishads to Arthavada, which is not acceptable. And so in the Tattva Samanvayat Sutra, Śaṅkarācārya provides an elaborate refutation of the Purva Mimamsa philosophy in the aspect of jnana being insufficient, which is what the Purva Mimamsa argues, that knowledge is insufficient for this, and therefore in those aspects the Purva Mimamsa philosophy is refuted. I mean, in summary, the basic principle of Vedanta is that in those aspects which are not in opposition to the entirety of the Veda, the other darshanas are accepted. And in those aspects which they are in contradiction, they are refuted. And that is why there is both the acceptance in certain aspects and the non-acceptance in other aspects of the other darshanas of philosophy within Uttara Mimamsa. So with that, I will bring this to conclusion, and apologies it has taken me a little longer, but thank you for the opportunity. Do you want me to say something briefly in Tamil, or have we?
Yes, very briefly, 2 minutes, okay. Quick summary.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. எல்லாருக்கும் வணக்கம். இப்போ நான் தமிழ்ல வந்து கொஞ்சம் இதை பத்தி பேச போறேன்னா, இப்போ நம்ம 6 தர்சனங்கள் உண்டு: சாங்கிய யோகம், நியாய வைசேஷிகம், பூர்வோத்தர மீமாம்சா. இப்போ பகவான் சூத்திரக்காரர் வந்து இந்த 6ல அந்த 6வதாக உத்தர மீமாம்சாவை வந்து அனுசரிச்சுண்டு இந்த பிரம்மசூத்திரத்தை வந்து ரச்சனை பண்ணிருக்கார். இதுல வந்து அந்த மத்த 5 தர்சனங்கள்ல வந்து சில பகுதிகளை வந்து எடுத்துண்டு சில பகுதிகளை விட்டுருக்கார். எந்த பகுதிகள்லாம் வந்து வேதத்துக்கும் வேதாந்தத்துக்கும் அனுகூலமாக இருக்கோ அந்த பகுதிகளை எடுத்துட்டு எந்த பகுதிகள் வந்து வேதாந்தத்துக்கும் வேதத்துக்கும் பிரதிகூலமாக இருக்கோ அந்த பகுதிகளை வந்து நிராகரணம் பண்ணிருக்கார். இந்த சாங்கியமும் யோகமும் பிரதான காரணவாத பட்சம், துவைத பட்சம், அந்த பட்சத்தை வந்து நிராகரணம் பண்ணிருக்கார் சூத்திரக்காரர். சாங்கியன் தான் இங்க வந்து பிரதான மல்லன், அதாவது வந்து சாங்கியனை வந்து பிரதான பூர்வபக்ஷியா எடுத்துட்டு வந்து சூத்திரக்காரர் வந்து அதுக்கு நிராகரணம் பண்ணிருக்கார். யோகமும் அதே காரணத்துக்காக நிராகரணம் பண்ணப்பட்டிருக்கு. நியாய வைசேஷிகம் வந்து சூத்திரக்காரருக்கு வந்து சம்மதமே இல்ல, சிஷ்ட அப்பரிகிரக அப்படி சொல்லியிருக்காரு. அதாவது வந்து இது வந்து சிஷ்டர்களால வந்து ஏற்கப்படாத ஒரு தரிசனங்கள்னு சொல்லப்பட்டிருக்கு. அப்படி சொன்னாலும் சில பகுதிகள் வந்து வேதத்துக்கு அனுகூலமாக இருக்கிறதுனால சோத்தவியோ மந்தவியோ நிதித்தியாசித்தவிய வந்து மரணம் இருக்கே விதிக்கப்பட்டிருக்கே மந்தவியன்னு சொல்லும் போது அந்த மரணத்துக்கு அனுகூலமாக இருக்கும்போது ஸ்ருதி அனுகிரகீத தர்க்கமாக இருக்கும்போது அந்த நியாயமும் வைசேஷிகமும் வேதாந்தத்துக்கும் உபயோகப்படுறது. ஆனா எப்ப வந்து அது அசத்காரியவாதமும் பரமாணு காரியவாதமும் சொல்றதோ அது வந்து ஒத்துக்கப்படாத விஷயம். ஏன்னா வேதாந்தத்துல வந்து சர்வஜ சர்வ சக்திமானாக இருக்கக்கூடிய பிரம்மன் தான் இந்த உலகத்துக்கு காரணம்னு சொல்லப்பட்டிருக்கு. அந்த தர்சனத்தை வந்து ஒழுங்கா அதோடைய தாத்பரியம் என்னன்னு புரிய வைக்கிறதுக்கு இப்ப நமக்கு வந்து பூர்வ மீமாம்சா தேவைப்படுறது. ஏன்னா இப்போ ஸ்ருதி தான் வந்து பரம பிரமாணமாக இருக்கு வேதாந்தத்துக்கு. அந்த பரம பிரமாணம் என்ன சொல்றது, அதோடைய தாத்பரியம் என்ன அப்படின்னு புரிய வைக்கிறதுக்கு பூர்வ மீமாம்சாவுடைய உதவி தேவைப்படுறது. அதுல நிறைய வந்து தாத்பரிய லிங்கங்கள் எல்லாம் சொல்லப்பட்டிருக்கு. எப்படி வந்து இதோட எந்த அந்த வேதம் வந்து அபூர்வஷயமாக இருக்கு, அதுக்கு வந்து ஒரு வேதத்தை சொல்ற வந்து ஒரு மனுஷன் இல்லை. சோ நீங்க நம்ம வந்து போய் வந்து ஈஸ்வரன் கிட்ட போய் நீங்க என்ன அபிப்பிராயத்தோட சொல்லிருக்கேன்னு கேட்க முடியாது. அதனால அந்த வேதம் என்ன சொல்லிருக்கோ அந்த சொல்லாலேயே அதை கண்டுபிடிக்கணும். அதனால வந்து அதுக்கு பூர்வ மீமாம்சா தேவைப்படுறது. ஆனா சில பகுதிகள்ல பூர்வ மீமாம்சாவும் வேதாந்தத்துக்கு வந்து விரோதமா இருக்கிறதுனால அந்த பகுதிகளை வந்து நம்ம ஒத்துக்கிறது இல்லை. இது வந்து இந்த ஒரு இதை கொடுத்ததுக்கு இண்டிகாவுக்கும் நிதின் ஸ்ரீதர் அவர்களுக்கும் நான் நன்றியை தெரிவிச்சுக்கிறேன். ஸ்ரீ குருபியோ நமஹ.
Thank you very much, Venkatraghavan ji, for a wonderful, very comprehensive and insightful presentation from an Advaitic perspective. Thank you very much for making time for the session.